Have you ever thought about writing a book, but felt like you didn't have the time, the expertise, or just didn't know where to start? Maybe you're wondering, who would even read it? Well, what if I told you that a book could be the ultimate tool for building authority, attracting high-value clients, and even adding millions in revenue to your business? Welcome back to another episode of the Vital Wealth Strategies podcast. I'm your host, Patrick Lonergan, and today we're diving into what it takes to write and publish a book that positions you as an expert in your industry. Today I have a guest who is an expert in helping leverage the authority of being a published author. Paul McManus is a best-selling author and the creator of the short book formula. He has helped financial advisors generate over $50 million in fees and commissions through book publishing. And today he's going to break down exactly how you can do the same. If you're an entrepreneur, financial advisor, or business owner looking to stand out, attract premium clients, and grow your business, this episode is packed with real strategies you can apply today. Plus, Paul shares the exact steps to get your book published, how to market it, and how to use it to generate serious revenue for your business. Now, a quick heads up before we get started. At Vital Strategies, we help high-income entrepreneurs keep more of what they earn. If you're tired of handing over six figures to the IRS, head to vitalstrategies.com/tax and let's change that. So stick around. You're not going to want to miss this. Now let's dive in. Paul G. McManus, thank you so much for joining us here today. I'm excited about this conversation. You're a best-selling author and trailblazer in the financial services realm. And as we were talking, I'm a financial advisor that services entrepreneurs. You're an entrepreneur that services financial advisors. But I appreciate that comment you made. I think there's a ton of wisdom in that. And I think this is going to be an interesting conversation for our audience. I know we have a number of advisors that listen to the show, just looking for the best strategies and how to serve clients from a cash flow perspective, tax, investment, and protection. And so, I think this will be something that'll be worthwhile for those folks, and also the entrepreneur clients that are just looking at, how do I grow and expand my influence? So, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you for having me. And it's interesting. As we're talking about it, I normally, all my stories and examples are really aimed at financial advisors. So I'm thinking, okay, I want to make sure that what I say is it adds value for entrepreneurs. I'm like, wait a minute, I think I know one. That's me.
That's right. Yeah. No, this is great. So I just want to walk through a few of the things that I think you've done that are impressive. So you're an author of the short book formula. You're also going to be releasing From Author to Authority. I love that title. And you're just the go-to expert for mastering LinkedIn, gaining visibility, and attracting premium clients. I think no matter who's listening, they would love to have more premium clients. So thank you for joining us here today. I think this is going to be good. So I'd like to start off, if that's okay, and just think about, like, you help financial advisors write books, get published, and I'm just going to think through some of the things that run through my head when it comes to that. So I'm like, first off, writing a book sounds hard. I'm a busy professional. We're serving our clients. I've got a family I love and care about. And it's like, okay, where am I going to find the time to, carve that out? Now, I think there's, to some level, it's like, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? And I think it's a little bit to discipline along the way, go a long ways. So that's the first thing that comes to mind. The second is, like, who's going to read this thing? How do I get into the, Ryan Holidays of the world from a business book perspective? And then, I think there's some internal things that can come along, like, man, am I expert enough to write a book? Do I have the wisdom and knowledge to share something that people would find valuable? So yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing your answers to some of those questions. Yeah. Do you want to just chip away at, sort of my first fear? What does it take to write a book? Like that sounds like an overwhelming type.
Yeah, no, of course. And I think you nailed probably three of the biggest questions that I get that people come to me and ask about. And the first one, of course, is time, right? I think for professionals, just really entrepreneurs, we're always looking for ways to grow our business. We're typically fairly busy people. And so, I know myself, before I got into this, I thought of writing a book as something that I'd have to go and, take a year sabbatical and rent a cabin in the woods, start smoking a cigar, and, and that wasn't in the cards for me. So I, never did it up until a number of years back when I got inspired to do so. I'll tell you a quick interesting side is that my first book, and this was, I think, back in 2019 that I wrote myself,
Hmm.
was I started with the book cover. So I hired a graphic designer. I had a title in mind. I hired a graphic designer. They created this really, nice book cover for me, and I posted it on social media. And suddenly people are like, "Wow, congratulations! This is so cool!" All these things. I'm like, I started feeling, good and everything. But
Hmm.
unfortunately, it satiated my actual desire and motivation to actually write
Hmm.
the book for another maybe 6 to 12 months, and so it probably set me back a
Hmm.
little bit. Because the
Yeah.
question
Yeah.
is if you know today what you knew, if you knew then what you know now, I would be writing my first book so much quicker, so much sooner, because there's so many different benefits
Hmm.
that accrue to it. But to your question,
Yeah.
time. So for anyone watching this, they can see my shirt. It's the short book formula, um, and
Hmm.
that's the name of my book, or one of my books. It's the short book formula. And the key idea or insight that I had is that to, most books, or at least the way we construe them, are these long tomes that are fine. But at the end of the
Hmm.
day, I come at this from a marketing point of view, or a marketer's point of view, and I
Yeah.
believe strongly that in order for a book to do its job from a marketing standpoint, in other words, how do you attract the right attention and then get people to come to you and then become clients? What you really want is a book that your ideal reader slash prospect slash client is going to take the time to read from cover to
Hmm.
cover, right? And I don't know about you, but I have a bookshelf behind me. You can probably see it there, and it's
Yep.
filled with books that I probably never read. Just because
Hmm.
if I get the physical book and it's too long, I might start a chapter, but then I have shiny object syndrome. I start looking elsewhere. And so
Yep.
my big insight was called the short book formula. And what that really translates into is a book that's about 12,000 to 25,000 words, a book that can be read in about 1 to 2 hours. But now, if you flip it
Hmm.
and say, okay, so now I'm the busy person, okay, where do I get the time to actually write that? Um,
Yep.
the methodology that we've, or not created, but that we have found and used and it works, is that the thing that our ideal clients have in common is that they tend to be good talkers. And by good talkers, I
Hmm.
mean they have experience, they have stories, they can take concept or abstract concepts and turn them into things that your average person can understand. And those are really the qualities that probably most of your listeners possess, those skill
Right.
sets. And if you can do that, then our actual methodology is not taking that year off and going and getting the cabin in the woods, but instead of about 6+ weeks, we help our clients talk out the content of their
Hmm.
books, through a series of coaching sessions, so that they can capture the wisdom that they've developed and over years, and that's in their
Hmm.
heads, and essentially get that down on paper, but without the excruciating pain of having to sit in front of a typewriter and type it out.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that. And I'm curious too on like it's been interesting over the last 12 months how I've started to use I'll call it
Yep.
AI, chat GPT to help not write things for me, but to collaborate and help refine my
Yep.
thinking. I've not spent a lot of time talking to chat GPT yet, but I know that's absolutely an option. But I think about I'm so good. It's funny. I have a couple administrative assistants that help just like keep me, they're for lack of a better term, adult babysitters, right? Like I need somebody to corral all of the thinking and the things I have going on and sit down and help me focus, right? And it's like I think there's some serious value to having an appointment on the calendar and we're going to sit down and we're going to get this thing done. And I can just give you a personal example of that. There's some webinars we work with this advisor service. It's called Lineberg. They've got a couple million people on their email list. They've approached us about putting together some webinars, and I've got those on the
Mm-hmm.
calendar. And the fact that those are on the
Yep.
calendar, those presentations get done on
Yep.
time. Where if I was like, hey, you know what? I'm going to produce this webinar at some point in the future. It would be so easy to go, man, I've got a busy day. I'm going to kick that down the road till next week. And then all of a sudden it just never happens. So I think there's some tremendous value into the fact that you set up a coaching call and you have some accountability with somebody to get that work done. Is
Yeah,
that
yeah, yeah. I
part of
mean,
the
yeah,
process
it's a
that?
big part of it. And just to kind of highlight one of the things you said about AI. I mean, AI. I
Hmm.
love AI, and I've been using it even before ChatGPT. So I got into AI back in 2022 when there was a company called Jasper. I don't know if that
Hmm.
name rings a bell or not, but they were kind of the precursor to ChatGPT. I started using it, and I've been in love with it ever since. So AI does a number of things, but to your point, the one thing it can't do is force us to keep our appointments, because it's probably a sad reflection commentary on my life, but I'm lonely, I'm bored, I sit there and I talk to my AI friend, and it gives me positive feedback, it affirms my
Right.
thinking, and all those
Yeah.
good things. But the one thing it won't do is that it won't provide that accountability. It's not going to say, "Hey, we have an appointment. You got to sit down and meet with me for
Right.
this time." And so, there's many aspects that we can get into in terms of the process. But one of them
Hmm.
is just accountability. It's right. Doing anything that's outside of your comfort zone is by definition uncomfortable. And so, you
Hmm.
know, writing a book, and you used the analogy before, it's like eating, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? If you don't have a
Hmm.
clear process and path, and ultimately support to help you go from point A to point B, chances are it's just not going to happen. It's been one of those things that you aspire to do one day, but you end up never getting
Yep.
to. I have a client who comes to mind. His name is Jim, and Jim is a financial advisor and super smart guy. He's probably in his 60s. He has 2 law degrees. He has every certification under the sun. When he first
Yeah.
came to us, I'm like, "Hey, so how long have you been thinking about this?" He's, "I've been writing a book for the last 20 years." And that leads into imposter syndrome, which is another topic we could
Right.
explore, but I'll pass it back
Yeah.
to you.
Yeah, yeah, no, this is fantastic, and you're right, because I think one of the questions I have, even putting together a webinar for other advisors, this podcast at times, I try to approach it from a perspective of like
Mhm.
curiosity. There's I don't know if it was Socrates, but uh, he makes a comment about the more you start to know, the more you realize you actually
Yeah,
don't know
yeah.
anything, and so it becomes awfully scary.
Quite
It's like, oh,
frustrating.
you start to
It's
learn.
quite frustrating, isn't it?
It is. It's like I start to learn some things about tax and trust structures and legal structures, and it's like, wow, I now know that I don't know all sorts of things. And I heard this analogy once that I thought was brilliant. And if I have a white piece of paper and I draw a pencil dot on it, okay, that pencil dot is what I know, and all of the white edges touching that pencil dot are what I realize I
Yeah,
don't know. So it's like actually we don't. I'm pretty ignorant to the things I
yeah,
don't know. But as my knowledge expands, so does the surface area on that
yeah,
dot, and now I realize it's like wow.
yeah,
There's a whole level of things that I don't know. So imposter syndrome, I feel like, is a real thing, and I think about the internal struggle. Like, am I
yeah,
expert enough to write a
yeah,
book? And so I know you touched a little bit
yeah,
about on that. On hey, when we talk on a topic, we can turn it into something that applies. But how do we put a spin on it that's unique, like that? It's like my message that I put out there into the world and resonates with
yeah,
people and actually provides value.
yeah. Great. And just let's start with imposter syndrome more broadly. So, um, I heard this term a number of years ago, and I'll never forget the story where it was actually, I think, my first. And this is maybe like 10 years ago, maybe, I don't know. But I was
Hmm.
doing like my very first podcast where I was the host, and I invited someone to join me. And of course, I'm feeling imposter syndrome because it's like, who am I to sit here in my living room and do
Hmm.
this? But the guest, I was really impressed with them. I forget their name, but they were known as the Penguin Lady. And this was like
Hmm.
one of the 4 people in the world that the UN called when there was a disaster somewhere and penguins were at risk. And so I'm like, wow,
Yeah.
this is so cool. I've scored the Penguin Lady, and I'm
Yeah.
feeling my imposter syndrome. And she comes on, and she like has total imposter syndrome. She's like, oh, who am I to talk about these subject matters? She's like written books.
Hmm.
She's on. She's like in the short list for experts in the world. And I'm just like,
Hmm.
really? And so
Yeah.
it's interesting, especially in what I do and just working with people and writing books. And I think a book really brings out the imposter syndrome in people, and we probably all have it to some degree, right? I mean, I think maybe some have it
Hmm.
more, some have it less. But one of the behaviors that I see, and you alluded to it, so it's either failure to start, which is what you said, is that who am I to write this? I mean, there's so many other books out there. What
Hmm.
unique contribution can I make to this? And that's very. So first of all, let's just acknowledge that that's very common, right?
Hmm.
When I'm talking to an advisor, the frame that I like to give them is that for 99, or so for, you know, if you're comparing yourself out of the gate against well-known authors just in the financial advisory space, I could say Dave Ramsey, Sue Orman, Robert Kiyosaki,
Right.
and you're like, who am I to compete with them? it's just the wrong frame to think about, right?
Hmm.
Aspirationally, if one day you want to get to that level, then I'm all about supporting that vision. But for your typical financial advisor, what they really could benefit from a book for is just a little bit
Hmm.
of differentiation in the marketplace. And so what I tell them is that if there's, any, you know, choosing an advisor is a huge decision for someone, because this is one of the most important decisions that a person can make, right? I mean, you don't want to get
Hmm.
this wrong. This can impact someone's future. And so typically people will do their due diligence, and they'll probably go and they'll interview a couple different advisors, and all things being equal, if each advisor has the same amount of experience, roughly same credentials, etc., same access to products, etc. What is that
Hmm.
difference maker where I now feel more comfortable choosing advisor A versus B or C? And what I find is so amazing about becoming an author, and this is like the one big idea in my book, the short book formula, is that fundamentally authorship accelerates the speed of trust. So authorship
Hmm.
accelerates the speed of trust. And so in that scenario, when you're thinking about writing a book, it's not comparing yourself to these big names that are intimidating. Instead, it's saying,
Yep.
I want to be better, or I want to be seen as more authoritative and more expert than advisor B and C. So suddenly that's a
Yep.
different frame. That's much more achievable. And then suddenly you can start thinking about where you're actually really good and strong, and your brilliance that you've accumulated over probably years, if not decades,
Hmm.
starts to really shine through.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And I think one thing that I've noticed when I'm creating content that helps with the imposter syndrome is um, the process of creating the content really helps us refine our thinking organizationally. It's like, wow, okay, let's make sure, let's expand out on that topic. Let's look at it from a macro point of view compared to all these other things we're talking about. And it's like, yep, how does that fit in? And I think it's also okay to go, this is who I am. This is what I believe. These are the values that I have, and I'm sort of planting my flag
Yep.
here. And it's okay if you don't like me, right? And I think Robert Kiyosaki does a great
Yep.
job of that. Dave Ramsey, I think they're all to some level
Sure.
polarizing in the
Sure.
context of like, hey, I either love that idea or hate that idea. Robert Kiyosaki has gained, uh, I'll say, notoriety for saying your house is not an
Mhm.
asset. And when you look at how he defines an asset, and I agree with him, an asset puts money in your
Mhm.
pocket, right? So that house becomes an asset when you sell
Mhm.
it, but it's not an asset while you live
Yeah.
there. But people are losing their minds because it's like, no, my house is my largest
Yeah.
asset, actually. And I don't like the fact that you're taking that out of my asset column. I think there's something to the fact that we can really plant a flag like, hey, this is who we are, and somebody reading that book and just thinking about trust goes, yes, this is exactly who I want to be aligned with, or no, I don't want to be aligned with that person. And it's almost okay. Like I think that's better than okay, because we're sort of just getting rid of the people that aren't going to be a great fit long term
Yeah.
anyhow, and we're bringing in what I'll call our ideal clients. I don't know if you have any
Yeah.
thoughts
Oh,
on that, but
you're speaking my love language. I mean, these are all
all right.
these are all things that I love talking about. First, okay, building on the idea of imposter syndrome. So I think you nailed it, right? I think
Mm-hmm.
actually not just writing the book. Because here's the other thing I've observed: a lot of people, they write their book or their manuscript, but then they don't publish. And
Mm-hmm.
it goes back to that imposter syndrome. And really, I think it's just the fear of being criticized, right? It's like, oh, it's
Yep.
not perfect yet. Oh, I need to refine it. Oh, I need to do this, that, and
Yep.
the other. And especially if that's you doing it, you know, doing it in a vacuum is not good, right? You absolutely need
Mhm.
support systems
Yeah.
to help
Yeah.
you get to the finish line and get it out there. The examples you brought up, Robert Kiyosaki, Dave Ramsey. I mean, they're both. You're right. They're both polarizing figures, and at the same time, here we are, talking about them, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
They've
Absolutely.
they've broken through the noise. They have a point of view, whether you agree or disagree. It's they're thought leaders. They're part of the conversation. And then finally, just to react to what you said about marketing, I think the best marketing is marketing that does just that. It's something that someone looks and say, "Wow, this person, I like what they're saying, and they align with my values. This is someone who I like." Right? I mean,
Mhm.
ultimately, this is trust at scale, because why do most advisors and probably entrepreneurs more broadly like referrals? It's because there's a transference of trust. And so what a
Mhm.
book or thought leadership, having a podcast, etc., helps and allows to do is to basically scale that so that a larger audience can come into contact with your thinking, your personality, these different things.
Mhm.
And they'll typically have one of two reactions. Oh, this sounds good, this is interesting, or this isn't for
Yep.
me. And both are okay. I mean,
Yep.
I don't want to spend any time one on one trying to convince someone or persuade someone to do something if they've like made a decision in advance that I'm not a good fit for them. That's okay. So another thing that you asked, and typically I'll get from people that I'm speaking with about book projects, is first the first question is, okay, is this possible to do? And so
Mhm.
I tell them in our approach, it takes about 6+ weeks, typically six to
Yep.
12 weeks. You don't have to, take time off from work. We build it into your schedule. So it's usually about 2 to 3
Yep.
hours of time per week over that 6 to 12 weeks. But then the next thing, and you asked this earlier, was okay, who's going to read this, right?
Mhm.
Because nobody, I think, wants to go through all this time, energy, resources, effort, and then ultimately, crickets, right? My
Right.
mom read
Right.
it.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
hope she reads it. I mean, don't get me wrong. I hope she reads it. But, really, when I talk to financial advisors, is that this book is something that should help you generate $1 million or more of revenue. And I tell,
Mm.
my ideal client advisors very specifically that it's not about book sales. And what I mean by that is that
Mhm.
it's not about royalties. Sure, you can maybe
Yep.
make a couple hundred, maybe a couple $1,000s on royalties, but that's missing the whole point. Is that you want
Yep.
to write a book, in my perspective, as the ultimate authority, positioning, marketing piece,
Mhm.
and done well, not just in writing and publishing it, but then ultimately in leveraging it to grow your practice. This should be a tool that can help you generate a million plus of business over time. And ultimately, I mean, just myself, I'm a case in point. I've written multiple books. My first one helped me generate $1 million of revenue over a
Mhm.
3 year period. The second one,
Yep.
I was able to speed that up, and it helped me generate a million in a 2 year period. And now I'm hoping my latest one will help me do
Yeah.
that in about a year if all things go well.
Yeah, yeah, no, I love that because that was a little bit of that was the question I was going to ask was, okay, it was easy for me to start my podcast because there was exactly 0 subscribers because I hadn't actually published anything yet. Now, those first episodes are still out there and people can go back and listen to them and they do, and that's all fine. But I've gotten better as
Yeah,
time goes on, and so and I think you said a little bit of that. I was impressed by the fact that you know that investment sounds like a great investment. I think about all of the marketing opportunities out there, and if I can put a book out into the world and it generates $1 million of revenue, and even if we stretch that out to 5 years, right, $200,000 a year of revenue, like that's fantastic. We're probably looking at all of our marketing lead sources and going, that one pulls in more than anything else, right? Per dollar spent. I think that's wonderful. But as time goes on, and I think we see this with authors too, their first book does okay. The second book, starts to really gain some traction. They kind of find their voice, and then as time goes on, the more they're publishing, the bigger the audience, the faster they're growing. And are you seeing that with advisors? Is this something they're doing? Hey, I got my first book out. Now I've really refined my thinking. Let's take an approach from this angle on the next book. Are they doing more than one book?
yeah. The short book formula opens up in people's just mind the thinking that they can do more than one. Again, for most of us, it's like
Hmm.
write a book.
Yeah.
That when will I have time to do that? But once they see that it's doable, achievable, and they do it, then ultimately they start thinking, okay, well, maybe I need a book for this. I need a book for that. Um, in our case, it's not so much the thinking has changed, although it can. It's more so the way that we position the value of the books is really around the outcome of business growth and business development.
Hmm.
And so what I find is that it's really, everything's a learning curve. And so, writing and publishing the book is a learning curve. And of course, we support them doing that. But then the second thing
Yep.
is, okay, once you have the book, how do I really maximize the value of it? And that's also a learning
Hmm.
curve. And I think that's probably maybe the little bit steeper learning curve. And so I'll just use myself as an example. One of the things that we talk about and advise our clients to do is that ultimately the book is the message, but now you need to take the book and go speak about it into the world or
Yeah.
write about. You need to create publicity for it so that people are aware
Hmm.
of the message. And for me, I find that speaking, whether it's in person or whether it's online such as podcasts, is one of the most effective ways to talk about it. I recently had the opportunity to speak as a guest on a podcast, which was huge. You may know it, Michael Kitces, the Financial Advisor
Oh yeah.
Success podcast.
Yeah. Early in my career, I listened through episode 0 through 300, 400. I don't know. I hit like all of the episodes because
Yeah,
I was trying to figure out how I wanted my
yeah,
practice to look, right? And there were so many good ideas that came out of Kits' podcast that were amazing. So good for
yeah.
you.
So so so
I'm gonna have to
I'm
go
four seven.
dust that
I'm
off.
episode
So
417, right? It's like,
all right.
to me, this is like a milestone. I mean, this is like my
Yeah.
that was my Oprah moment, right? It's like I made it.
Yeah.
But the point is that how did I get on that podcast? Well, I had a book,
Hmm.
I had a message, and that
Hmm.
gave me access to be on the podcast. But as a direct result of that, I can conservatively say I'm going to generate $500,000, right?
Hmm.
But
Yep.
the book was a necessary component to be able to access that opportunity. And as you go forward, and this is where it's like you can go from one, from 3 years down to two down to one, is that as you get better at this, you build more context, more networks,
Hmm.
etc. Well, now you get a new book, and now suddenly you put
Yep.
it into play, and you go back to maybe the same source and say, "Hey, I have a new book, new relevance." I heard motivational speaker Brian Tracy
Mm.
say that he likes to publish a book, and this is maybe a few years back. He's getting older now, but he likes to publish a book every 6 months. And the reason for
Yep.
it is that he wants to be relevant. He wants to go back out there and have a chance to speak. Get earned media.
Hmm.
Energize his email list, community, etc. So just as you get better and better at that, and you grow your influence, then it just becomes progressively easier to make that revenue back sooner.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love this. And one of the things that you mentioned that I think is also really valuable is sort of stacking these pieces together,
Mhm.
right? Like I've got a book, I'm doing speaking engagements. I think they start to compound on each other, and then I think there's another piece that is maybe undervalued, maybe not, but like the size of my
Mm,
audience. Audience takes a minute to
it is.
grow. It's all of the little things we do, and we might have an Oprah type moment or a Kitsis type moment, and those can really like accelerate our growth from an audience perspective. But I think having an audience that you have authority with,
Yeah,
that is listening to what you have to say, that is excited
yeah,
about the new things that you're putting out, I think there's a ton of value in that, and I think it takes time to grow. But I think what you're talking about with the speaking in the books, or the books, and then sort of leveraging that into speaking engagements and whatnot is absolutely critical to helping build that audience. So yeah, I don't know if you have any comments on
yeah.
audience, but I think that's.
But building an audience is hard. I mean, it's something that I think. I mean, and you know this. I would
Hmm.
imagine because you have a podcast and you've been doing this for a while, and it takes time, energy, commitment, all these good things. I have a podcast, um, and I think it's been. I think I started at probably been 5 years or more. I haven't been as
Hmm.
consistent with my own podcast just because it's hard. It takes time and energy to
Yep.
grow the audience over time. And so just as I'm advising clients, because I think starting a podcast is fairly popular nowadays, and I think it's one of those pillars of influence
Hmm.
or authority marketing. And so I'm a fan of hosting your own podcast if you do it for the right reasons, meaning you actually
Yep.
enjoy doing it, you enjoy being a good host and interviewing people. But for me, what I typically recommend to the average advisor is that if you're looking to build, differentiate yourself, build authority, ultimately to
Hmm.
build your practice, that my recommendation order is start with a book because you really capture your
Hmm.
core message and you do what you said, which is you really refine your thinking. One of the ancillary
Yep.
benefits of a book is that it forces you to refine your thinking. Okay, what do I do? Why do people come to me? Why should they care? All those good things. And then the next step is what I would call guest podcasting, is that you now
Hmm.
have a message that you can take and get essentially what's known as earned media, which is you
Right.
can say, hey, I'd love to be in your show. um, but from an audience perspective, the beautiful thing there is that the host that you're approaching typically has done, I would say, the hard work of
Hmm.
building the audience, building a following, etc. And so now you're
Yep.
leveraging that to be able to more quickly create awareness in the marketplace. And then I think the
Yeah.
third level is that, so in my recommendation, start with the book, the message, then get into guest podcasting. And then the third thing is optionally determine if hosting your own podcast is a good fit. Because I think that also has its
Yep.
place, but it's probably one of the hardest things to do when it comes to
Yep.
really maximizing the value of it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's true. And the inertia, it's one of those physics terms, a body in motion
Right.
or body at rest likes to
Yep.
stay at
Yep.
rest, and a body in motion likes to stay in motion. And it's like getting
Yep.
started on the podcast. It was so hard. Now it just happens. And we've got, I don't know, I think a couple months of episodes sort of in the bank. So over the summer I can travel and I don't have to worry about, publishing every week. But we're moving along in a pattern that is easy because we've got the ball in
Yeah. No,
motion.
exactly.
But
Exactly.
you look at the podcast data around the number of episodes that make it past 10 or the number of shows that
Yep.
make it past 10, it's hardly any because it's people, they interview their friends and family for the first few episodes and they're like, now what do I do? So,
It's kind of like New Year's
yeah,
resolutions. It's like, yeah, this is going to be
yeah,
great.
yeah, yeah. No, this is great. So now I've got
Okay.
questions about um, this process. Like, do I need a some huge random house? How do I
Yep.
get my book out into the world? Like that also seems like a part of the puzzle
Mhm.
that sounds super scary to me. And it's just easier to keep doing what I'm doing than
Yep.
go try to figure
Yep.
that out. So can you talk to us about how we get
Yeah.
published?
Um, so I think there's maybe less than 1% of people that trying to get a quote unquote book deal would make sense.
Hmm.
And this is less than 1%. These are people that, are already, celebrities. Either they're a celebrity, meaning
Yep.
that maybe they should, they're on, CNN, Fox News, whatever it is on a
Hmm.
regular basis. They're a household name. It's like, I know that person, right? If you have
Yep.
that level of celebrity in the marketplace, then that, getting an actual traditional book deal might be a good fit. Or, and you
Hmm.
mentioned Ryan Holiday before, if you have a massive email list and you have the ability to
Yeah.
promote a book via email to a huge database of loyal subscribers, then you could go either way, but you'd have the ability to get a book deal. I find though that for
Hmm.
the 99.8% of us that simply see the benefits of a book but don't want to be constrained by any limitations, that simply getting it published to Amazon by, for all intents and purposes is really all anyone should be looking to do. Um, our
Hmm.
process is we help people do everything from, from blank sheet of paper to essentially getting published on Amazon, but ultimately we'll publish people on Amazon just for the benefit, just because it's such a simple platform to publish
Yep.
on. A couple of key things that I always like to tell people is that, and I find quite amazing, is that once you can literally print your book on demand, right? So one of the things that I've heard
Mm.
advisors tell me over the years, and just others more generally, is that I got 200 copies of my book collecting dust back here. They're out of date. What I do with them,
Yeah.
and so that should not be the case. In today's world, I mean, I literally print my book on demand, book by book. Um, and
Nice.
another thing is that I use mine as the ultimate. I call it a sales conversion piece, right? So I use my book to
Hmm.
create awareness, messaging, etc. But ultimately, the way that I use it at a very practical level is that when someone becomes aware of me because, say, I'm on a podcast, they schedule time with me. We'll
Hmm.
schedule, say, an initial 15-minute call. And then if it seems like it might be a good fit, I'll then proactively get their address and then send them at my
Hmm.
own dime a copy of my book
Yep.
or books. The
Sure.
reason that I do this because I know the power of the book in terms of accelerating the speed of trust. So by the time we
Hmm.
speak again, I don't need to present, I don't need to try to convince, persuade, etc. It's like I simply go, "What questions do you have? What stood out to you?
Yep.
Where would you like to go now?" And it just makes the whole sales process enjoyable, smooth, seamless. But back to Amazon, is that not only can you print on demand, but because they have the service called Prime, which everyone knows about, I can literally for
Yeah.
$5 print a book on demand, send it to you for $5. Now, think about the traditional way of doing that. I could go buy my book for $5 to $10, take it down to FedEx,
Hmm.
spend $10, my time. It's like so simple that I couldn't
Yeah.
imagine doing what I do without a book as part of that process.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. So I love
Yeah. Oh
audiobooks.
yeah.
Now
Absolutely.
I send people books all the time. I sort of take I listen to probably at least a book a
Mm,
week. But when I listen to a good one, I buy hard
mm,
copies
yeah.
because I'm like
Yeah.
I'm starting going to hand this out
Yeah.
to people and I don't care if they necessarily
Yep.
read it. I mean, read that copy. They can download the audio copy, they can get the Kindle copy, but it's like I think there's some power to like, hey, I think
Yep.
this idea is worthwhile and you should
Yep.
explore it. And I think people appreciate I don't know, physical
I think so.
things. It's kind of nice to get something in the mail that was like curated for
Yep.
you. Can you talk a little bit about
Yep.
audiobooks? I assume Amazon owns
Yep.
Audible. I have my Audible account. Can I just audio record my
Yeah.
book as well and make it available that way for people if they want to check it
Yeah.
out?
I'm a big believer in audiobooks. Just like you, I listen to audiobooks all the time. I listen to books more than I actually read books. I'm a big
Hmm.
believer that at the end of the day, the message that you create for your book ultimately, it doesn't matter if they listen to it, if someone listens to it, if they read it, don't really care. I want people to consume the message, and that's where the
Hmm.
magic happens. So I'm a big believer is once you write your book, publish it, the next step is to create an audiobook. So the most popular platform is Audible, which is part of
Yep.
Amazon, and a couple different ways to do it. And interestingly, we talked about AI a little bit earlier. So I have three versions of my book. I have the
Hmm.
version that I paid a what's it called, a professional speaker, whatever, a
Yep.
narrator to do for me. So I have
Hmm.
that version. I have the version that I read because I wanted to, do it myself. And then I have what I actually like the most, which is AI Paul. So this is the
Yeah.
cloned version of my voice. And
Yep.
one, it's much easier to create because I can actually
Hmm.
delegate this to someone else to create. But what's funny is that I'll even show like a sample. It's like the old Pepsi and Coke, comparison blind taste test. I'll say, okay, listen to this for a minute, listen to this for a
Yep.
minute, and I don't give them context. I just say, which one do you like better? And
Hmm.
invariably they'll choose AI Paul over real Paul. And I'm like
Wow.
hurt, but I'm also excited because if the AI version of me
Yeah.
is better than the real version, that just frees me up.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's so interesting because we did a whole AI episode and we let ChatGPT generate the content. We uploaded some transcripts so it knew my like
Mm,
voice, right? ChatGPT generated the content on
yep,
AI and why people should
yep.
adopt it. And then I used the service that could read that transcript using samples
Yep.
of my voice. It created a
Was it
recreation
11 Labs?
of I don't remember
Okay,
exactly the
yeah.
service.
And just as a side, that's one I use. Is probably one of the best ones out there. It's 11labs.io, I think.
Great. We'll make sure
Yeah,
that's in the show notes. But it was pretty fun to sort
yeah.
of have AI put this whole episode together. And there were some things that I thought were interesting. Like AI couldn't say AI. It would go I. It was like it was trying to I'm like, come on, you're smarter than this. You should know. You should know your name. That was kind of fun, but it's interesting to hear you say that. So, can I just ask why you do three versions?
just,
Is it?
just over time,
Yeah.
just I mean, like, so for me, I have imposter syndrome when it comes to my
Hmm.
voice, right? And so the first version, I'm like, I'm just going to have a professional do it, and this is before I got into the AI voice cloning part. And then
Yep.
over time, I'm like, hey, I need to lead by example because I'm telling other people that they should, read it, narrate it themselves. So I wanted to lead by example, so I recorded it myself. And then probably after
Yep.
that, I discovered, the AI got to a point where it was actually really cool. And so at this point, I have a preference for something like that to do the AI version. Although there is one caveat, at least currently, Audible. And the rules aren't really clear, but as far as I can tell, and I pay attention to this,
Hmm.
they will not accept from most people an AI clone version as an Audible book. So they have certain standards in place, and
Sure.
currently, and this could be changing, they don't allow for you to upload an AI version. And at the same time, there are AI versions on their site. And so to me, the
Yep.
rules seem a little bit unclear. I'm
Hmm.
sure at some point we're going to be able to do the AI version just because that's going to become the norm. But
Yep.
at this point, that is the one drawback to using AI is that you can create a version, you can make it available like I do on my website, but you can't necessarily upload it to Audible. So in which case, then you'd want to do it either in your own real voice or
Hmm.
hire a voice professional.
Yep. And I could see maybe Amazon's point of view there. Like, okay, people might just have the machines generating massive amounts of content, and it might not be worth a crap,
It's-
So uh, let's
people,
let's take some of the
people can
machines
do that
out.
without the
Yeah.
AI. I mean,
You're right. Yeah, so true. So true. Um, Good. All right. Paul, one thing you also mentioned that got my attention was I'm thinking about speaking engagements, being on, Fox
yep,
News, some of those other things. I feel like a book can be one of those things that, again, allows me to be an authority in a space. And I think the more niche the space, probably the better.
yep,
And when that topic
yep,
comes up on a news show or something along those lines, I'm sure there's ways to get my hat in the
yep,
ring for them to go, hey, I'm going to
yep,
call Paul when the time comes to talk about how to write a
yep,
book, right? And for
yep,
financial advisors. And so, is there? I know this is a little outside
sure,
of the scope, but do you have any thoughts on like how to leverage the book into some of these other speaking
yeah,
engagements, from media presentations to,
yeah,
yeah?
yeah,
So,
perfect. So, just to frame it briefly,
hmm
I believe that authorship, which is authority, plus speaking, is a 1 plus 1 equals 3 activity.
hmm
1 plus 1 equals 3
hmm
activity, and all I mean by that is that there's a lot of synergy between the two. So, authorship is very persuasive, influential. Speaking is very persuasive and influential. When you combine them, it creates an outsized result. And so that's why I
hmm
think you see a lot of, just influential people, right? That, any famous person typically that we're aware of, typically they'll have a book and you see them talking somewhere. I mean, those are like the two
Yep.
common denominators. From my
hmm
vantage point right now, and, this isn't, like getting on Fox News isn't really, I haven't helped someone do that. So I'm going to give that caveat, but just from what I can see, um, is there's different, so for I mean, I guess what you call earned media, I think what's much
hmm
more accessible today is to get on podcasts as a guest. And then from that,
Yep.
I think getting on bigger and bigger and bigger podcasts is ultimately the goal because then you create a bigger awareness in terms of the audience that you're trying to reach. I mean, interestingly, in this most recent presidential election, they talked about how it was actually the candidates going on podcasts that may have had more impact than them going
hmm
on the traditional news sites.
Yep.
That being said, so okay, how do I get on Fox News or something like that? From everything that I know, ultimately you need the building blocks in place. I think a book
hmm
is like the first thing, the first layer. But at that point, you probably need a professional PR person, and so there's firms out there
hmm
that you spend 2 to 4 grand a month, and they're going to be looking for these opportunities for you. And they won't guarantee that they're going to get you on Fox per se, but they will be able to get you written up in different high profile newspapers, magazines, etc. And then
Yep.
my assessment is that at this point, if you're like really good, you create those opportunities. And so it's not guaranteed, but it's just like anything. You have the ability to work your way through to the top if you apply yourself
Yep.
and probably have a little bit of luck along the way.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's fantastic. Paul, you've given us a ton of insight into, how we get a book out in the world. Is there anything we haven't touched on? We've talked about how we go about creating the content. I love the idea of a short book. It just seems so true. And I can say, this is a Robert Kiyosaki quote that I love. He was like, I'm not a best writing author. I'm a best selling
I love that.
author,
I love that quote too.
Yeah, and it's like that's wonderful because he writes at a level that I can
Yep.
understand, that I relate to, that is easy to just. I When I got my hands on his book, I read it all in
Yep.
one day. I was like, "This is
Yep.
amazing." I got through it, and it was easy and it was good. So I think about putting together short book. We self publish. Amazon sort of the
Yep.
key to helping us do that. I think that's where most people are buying books. I don't have to go get a Random House book
Yep.
deal.
And,
I think those are hard to
even
come
that can be
by.
counterproductive because what Random House cares about is selling books. And if you're,
hmm
like, say, an advisor, you don't really care about selling books. You care about leveraging the
Yeah,
book to your services. Now, I'm not saying that you turn down the
yeah,
deal, but it's really not that important.
yeah, yeah. So now that I've got my book written and my book published, is there anything else that I need to be, and then I market that book by going out and being on podcasts that align with
Yep.
that topic, and people, now I'm starting to establish myself as an authority
Yeah.
figure. Is there anything else that I need to add to that equation for sort of getting my book out there into the world?
Yeah. I mean, just, that those are the essential building blocks, at least from the way that I see
Mhm.
it. I think it's just as you see the results, you just start getting. You start getting outsized results. You get at easier,
Mhm.
and for most people, it's enjoyable, and it's like all these good things. And so then it's just how do I continuously create more opportunities and bigger opportunities, right?
Yep.
And so then that could be, there's different ways to approach it. I think each person needs to assess depending where they're at. In my case, I do both of those. I also oftentimes
Mhm.
I'll sponsor events, so it's kind of the pay to play, so to speak, where I'll go
Yep.
and spend $10,000 $15,000 on a sponsorship where my ideal clients hang out, and I'll get trade booth, but I'll also get a speaking
Mhm.
opportunity.
Yeah.
But I think over time, it's just the more you can create earned media and speaking opportunities and network, then you can open up bigger and bigger doors. And so
Yep.
it just it just takes, I think, a game plan. It takes support. I figured this out over years myself, and so if you're listening
Mhm.
to this, you're like, oh, I understand that I do this already. It's like, great, you can do it, but for probably most people, you do need support, guidance, etc. A
Yeah.
few adult babysitters, as you said, to help you get
Yeah.
from point A to point B more quickly. But it's totally
Yep.
achievable, and it's so worth it. I'm like living personally. This is what I help clients do, but I'm personally living the dream. It's so rewarding. If
Mhm.
you haven't, don't make my mistake and just cover your, post your book cover and then waste a year not writing it.
Yeah.
Get the book out there, take the next steps,
Yeah.
learn in action, accrue the benefits.
I love it. All right. So, Paul, you're leading us directly to next steps, right? Like, let's say I'm listening to this and I'm a financial advisor and I want to publish a book. How does somebody get in touch with you? What is the best way to do that
Yeah.
for them to move this process
Very
forward?
simple. You can go to my website, theshortbookformula.com, and there you can get a complimentary copy of my audiobook. And if it makes sense to talk,
Mhm.
my calendar information is there as well.
I love it. I'm on the website right now. We'll have show notes available for Paul's link, theshortbookformula.com. And I see you can schedule a call. You can download the free audiobook. I think that is all fantastic. Also, Michael Kitsis, he does a great job. He's an industry leader and, can absolutely, episode 417, you should check out kitsis.com. I think / 417 will get you to that episode. If I remember the Kitsis
It is.
formula for getting the episodes.
Once
Yep.
I got that, I'm going to remember this one.
Yeah, yeah. So that's wonderful. Kitsis does a great
He
job
does. He does.
diving into these things. So, Paul, I don't know if you have any guidance for, let's say somebody's not a
Yeah.
financial advisor. Is that somebody you'd like to work with, or do you have somebody, someplace you could refer them to if they're like, hey, I need to get a book going?
Yeah,
What?
I generally work with financial advisors. It doesn't mean that we don't work with
Mhm.
other people if they reach out to us. I think the key distinction though is that we help really professionals who are looking to grow their business or their practice, right? So
Mhm.
oftentimes professional service providers, it could be an entrepreneur depending on what you're doing and what you're
Sure.
trying to accomplish. But I guess what we don't really help with is like someone that's trying to write their memoirs, right? Our
Right.
books have
Right.
a purpose, which is to help you grow your business. And so
Yep.
I think any entrepreneur, for most of us, that's the goal. So if that describes you and you're looking
Mhm.
for help, absolutely, feel free to reach out.
Love it. I love it. Paul, and I think about what happens when somebody pursues this process and takes it to the finish, right? I'm thinking about the successful results. You were talking about how it uh, builds this trust, right? It creates
Yep.
authority, transfers the trust from, this book to me. Like now the person's going, all right, cool. There's some level of authority figure here that they got a book out into the world that means something. And then ultimately, what that means to us is just increased revenue, right? That's the whole goal. We want to turn this book into more ideal clients that drive revenue through our firms. And then I think about if we don't do that, right? Like,
I
uh,
no,
right.
don't send me back. Do not send me back. I cannot imagine. No, seriously, I started a I started a new. I've gotten to the point where I literally cannot sell anything without a book supporting it.
Mhm.
Um,
Yep.
I started a new service not too long ago, and I was trying to talk to people about it, but it was just fumbling around, and I
Mhm.
could tell it wasn't landing. And I just
Yeah.
realized, okay, what and usually with what I do, it's like it's so easily and seamless. I'm like, what am I missing here? And it's like, the book.
Hmm.
And so
Yeah.
I had to write the book. And as soon as I did the book, back to expectations.
Yeah, yeah, no, I love this. This is great. So, like, you know, if we don't write the book, it's just we're going to continue to struggle. We're continue to have a hard time articulating our thoughts, getting people to trust us. So, I think that's fantastic, and it really does help transform us from the struggling entrepreneur into one that's thriving and optimizing every area of their life. Because, like, cool, I've got when revenue generation solves a number of problems in a business, right? If we've got plenty of cash coming in, we're in a very healthy spot. And this sounds like a fantastic opportunity to help with that. So, Paul, this has been wonderful. I do appreciate all of your insight and wisdom. Again, check out Paul's website. We'll have linked to the show notes, but he's helped advisors generate over $50 million in fees and commissions for their clients. I think that's fantastic. There's obviously evidence that this is a fantastic marketing tool and brings authority to the author. So thanks so much, Paul, for joining
Great.
us. Have a great
Thank
day.
you. Enjoyed it.
That's a wrap on today's episode. I hope you found a ton of value in this conversation with Paul McManus. If today's discussion sparked some ideas for you, if you're thinking about how you can leverage a book to grow your authority and attract more of your ideal clients, then I encourage you to take action. And if you enjoyed this episode, do me a favor. Share it with someone who could benefit from it. Whether it's a fellow entrepreneur, a financial advisor, or just someone looking to level up their business, this information could be the catalyst for their next big breakthrough. And remember, you're a vital entrepreneur. You're vital because you're the backbone of our economy, creating opportunities, driving growth, and making an impact. You're vital to your family, creating abundance in every aspect of life. And you're vital to me because you're committed to growing your wealth, leading with purpose, and creating something truly great. If today's episode got you thinking about how much you're really keeping from what you earn, let's take it further. Visit vitalstrategies.com/tax. Start building a tax strategy that works for you. Thank you for being a part of this incredible community of vital entrepreneurs. I appreciate you, and I look forward to having you back here next time on the Vital Wealth Strategies podcast, where we help entrepreneurs minimize their taxes, master wealth, and optimize their lives. I'll see you next week.